former president, Mohamed Morsi, have refused to leave Nasser city since he was pushed from power on Wednesday. They are defiant and outraged, believing their man, their party and their country has been wronged. And the leader of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood Party is vowing to carry on.
The people of Egypt will continue to protect the results of its revolution and protect their deservedly rights. The rights will not be removed from us as long as we remain to protect them.
Earlier, when supporters of the deposed president tried to reach the Republican Guards building in Cairo, where it's claimed Morsi is being held, gunfire and bloodshed. 3 people are reported to have been killed. And in Tahrir Square, the scene of jubilation on Wednesday night, those who opposed Morsi's presidency remain defiant too.
I really wish that the Muslim Brotherhood would act wisely and think long term. Nobody wants to exclude the Muslim Brotherhood. They cannot be excluded because they are a reality. They are a reality of our political life, but they do not have to have a president in office in order to prove this reality.
The army which helped orchestrate Morsi's removal was on the streets as night fell, but not in big numbers, leaving those on opposing sides here battling it out between themselves. Emma Hayward, Al Jazeera.
Well, our reporters on the ground have been covering events. We have Nicole Johnston in our bureau in Cairo and Jamal El-Shal at the pro-Morsi rally in Nasser city. First of all, Jamal, let's go to you. It's still an incredibly noisy scene there. I understand that the numbers have been swelling.
Indeed, Laura, the numbers here this Friday, as we enter the second week of this sit-in, are probably the largest they have been. It is just gone, I believe, 11 p.m. here, or sorry, rather midnight here. So some of those who were gathered behind have entered, have entered the mosque below me and also gone under some of the trees and buildings here to get some rest. However, by far the turnout today has been the largest we've seen over the past 7 days. Mainly, the Muslim Brotherhood will claim this is because this is no longer a protest in support of Mohamed Morsi. This has transformed, by all intents and purposes, into a pro-democracy protest. They say those who are coming here are not just supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood or of Mohamed Morsi, but they are those who are coming to fight for the identity of Egypt, to ensure that this is a democratic country and that the clock is not turned back to when it was the military that was governing this country. So that it could be possibly one of the reasons behind it. Another, obviously, is that the Muslim Brotherhood, as we heard in Emma's report, there genuinely believes and feels that this coup is not only a coup against democracy, but it is a conspiracy against their very existence. They believe, when they've seen their leaders rounded up and their channels and media essentially closed down and their supporters killed, that this is a battle for existence. So that could have also been one of the reasons why so many more people have come up. But by no doubt, the numbers, the turnout today has been by far the largest they've managed to galvanize over the past week.
And Jamal, what sort of military presence are we seeing there?
Well, Laura, it has been an increased military presence on the outskirts of this protest or gathering. Just to give you an idea, basically, this isn't really a square like Tahrir Square is, or, for example, the one outside Cairo University. This essentially is a junction, which looks almost like a cross or a crucifix, and you have people going from all 4 of those roads, basically. But at the very end of each one of them, there is a massive presence of military armored personnel carriers, of soldiers, and also not too far from here is the Presidential Guard Club and the Presidential Palace. Earlier today, some of the several thousand protesters who were here decided to march onto the Presidential Guard to try and demand the release of President Mohamed, or ousted President Mohamed Morsi, where they were fired upon and at least 3 people killed. But the sentiment being felt here still remains one of defiance. As I spoke to one of the people there, one of the younger protesters, a 19-year-old girl, who was telling me how that last year was the first time she had ever voted in her life, She had voted for Mohamed Morsi. She came here, she told me, to return her votes that have been stolen by the military coup, as she put it. So strong feelings here, Laura.
Absolutely. OK, Jamal, we'll leave it there for the moment. Many thanks for the update there from the pro-Morsi, pro-democracy rallies, as they now call themselves, in Nasser City. Let's cross over to Nicole Johnston. She's also in Cairo. Now, she's near where those clashes took place on October 6th bridge just a few hours ago now. Nicole, do tell us about this violence, how it unfolded, because it appeared to dissipate as quickly as it started.
That's right. We saw hundreds of people start to cross the 6th of October bridge, certainly more than a couple of thousand people by the time they'd all made their way across. They were moving not that quickly, carrying Egyptian flags and pictures of deposed President Mohamed Morsi. As they crossed the bridge, they didn't head to the right, which would have taken them down to Tahrir Square and to those rallies and celebrations against the deposed president. They headed in the other direction towards the state television building, and they started a sit-in there. There was then a lull for a brief period. Then after that, that's when the violence started to break out. Now, some people from Tahrir Square moved towards the pro-Morsi crowd. It's impossible to say who started it, how it really started, but we saw people with sticks, throwing stones, breaking up the pavement to use rocks against each other. We would see one crowd move against the other side, and it was sort of an attack and defence kind of movement, and then that side would move towards the other side. This went on for about 3 hours, and then, as you said, almost as quickly as it began, the pro-Morsi crowd started to pull back, to withdraw back across the 6th of October bridge. There were celebrations then from those who had come from Tahrir Square, for those people against the deposed president. And then the military arrived. Finally, they'd been flying above all of this chaos and violence for 3 hours in military helicopters. Eventually, their armoured vehicles were on the streets, and a number of them actually gave rides or lifts to civilians, to people from the anti-Morsi crowd.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that, Nicole. The fact that we saw these military vehicles on the streets there just after those clashes, giving rides to the anti-Morsi crowds. I mean, that really sent a message out, didn't it, to Egyptians as to which side they'd taken.
Yes, and that's a message that has been quite clear, according to the pro-Morsi crowd, for the last few days, or really since these rallies began. When we had the large demonstrations in Tahrir Square on the 30th of June, that's when we first saw military helicopters starting to fly low above the crowd, and every time they did that, they would get a huge roar of support from the crowd there. So there was a strong sense from those people that they felt that the military was behind them, that the military was on their side. And that feeling became stronger over the next couple of days as those military helicopters began to drop Egyptian flags into the crowd. Whereas at the rallies in support of the deposed president at Nasser City and Cairo University, at those rallies you would see the military keep its distance. The helicopters were off in the distance, keeping an eye out, but not flying down low. And then eventually they encircled those areas on the night that the Egyptian military made its statement with regards to forcing the president to leave.
Nicole Johnston, live for us in Cairo there. Thanks very much for the update on events. We're, of course, going to keep a very close eye on the live shot. We can see Tahrir Square, we can see Nasser City. We'll be keeping an eye on events there. Now, these all happening just 48 hours after Mohamed Morsi was deposed from office, and he was only in office for 1 year. So let's take a look at the key moments in the build-up to his fall from power. On June 30th, mass protests against him marked his first anniversary in office. An unprecedented number of people filled the streets in major cities. Anti-Morsi protesters marched on the presidential palace, whilst his supporters organised their own rallies. The protest organisers, Tamarod, then gave Morsi a deadline to stand down or face an open-ended campaign of disobedience. The army followed by issuing Morsi 48 hours to meet the people's demands or face an imposed solution. Morsi opponents packed Tahrir Square while his backers joined a sit-in in the Nasser city neighbourhood. Now, fighting between the rival sides has left 16 people dead, but Morsi refused to quit. Then on to July 3rd, and the army gives its solution. Egypt's military chief announces that Morsi has been deposed. The following morning, his replacement, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Adli Mansour, is sworn in. And on Friday, today, Mansour dissolves the upper house of Parliament.